Dharani, you can start now.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Good evening to one and all present here for the IEEE International Webinar Series, SAVANT 3. I am Dharani V, IEEE Student Chairperson of Women in Engineering Society from the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering on behalf of St. Joseph Institute of Technology, here to volunteer for today's session. Now, I would like to extend my first and foremost gratitude to our Honorable Chairman, Sir Dr. B. Babu Manoharan, our Managing Director, Ma'am, Mrs. B. Jessipriya, our Director, Sir, Mr. Sashi Sekhar, and our beloved Principal, Dr. B. Ravichandran, Sir, for giving us this opportunity to conduct the webinar. I would also like to extend my gratitude to our head of the department, Dr. C. Gnanakausalya ma'am, Staff and Student Affairs, and Dr. G. Rohini ma'am, Lab Affairs, for their ceaseless support. Now, I'll be sharing a few words about our speaker. Ms.PATTY Rowland BURKE is a fellow with the Bell Mason Group, a Silicon Valley corporate venture and innovation consultancy. She was previously the Innovation and Venture Catalyst with the Center of Creative Leadership, CCL, focused on leadership trends and new service innovation. She is the co-author of Beating the Odds, Winning Strategies for Women in STEM, a new book that tells us the personal stories of how technical women succeed in today's workplace. And she also co-developed CCL's pioneering Advancing Technical Women course that has helped thousands of technical women advance in their careers. Prior to joining CCL, she was an innovation and corporate ventures capital consultant working with venture capitalists, startups, and global corporations. She was previously VP marketing at Symantec and a startup Ramp Networks, where she led marketing and corporate positioning strategy from product introduction to NAS, DAQ, IPO, and acquisition. She was an instructor for Caltech Industrial Relations and advisor to entrepreneurial programs at California College of Arts and Design, MBA, and San Jose State University, Lucas College, and Graduate School of Business. She has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Texas at Austin and currently resides in San Jose, California. So before we start the session, I would like to say a few instructions to be followed by the participants. So kindly post your questions in the chat box if there are any questions. And this question and answer session will be conducted in the end of the webinar. And the attendance link will be posted in the end of today's webinar. So these are the instructions to be followed. And if anything, please post your questions in the chat box if any queries. Now I invite our speaker to kindly start her session. Ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dharani. I really appreciate that kind introduction. It was quite long, so as you can tell, I have been doing this for quite some time. And I'm very excited, as I was telling Dharani and the rest of the organizers, so excited to be here with you all. The book that I wrote with Kelly Simmons at the Center for Creative Leadership was really a passion project for both of us. We both have, most of my friends are women in engineering. Kelly herself is an engineer and practiced engineering for many years before she moved into leadership development. So this is an area that we know quite a bit about, learned much more about in writing the book, and really want to share that message with you all today. So thank you very much for having me. So the name of our book is Beating the Odds. It's about winning strategies of women in STEM. Most of you are early in your careers, and this book is really about women who made it to later in their careers into very senior management positions in technical fields. So there are, of course, we're happy to say many more women who have achieved senior positions in general, but not that many who have achieved senior positions in STEM fields. So that's really what we want to talk about, are those unique women and how they did it. Before I do that, let me say a word about the Center for Creative Leadership. I was there for 5 years. They are the ones who sponsored us writing this book. If you're not familiar with CCL, they do have an office in India. It is a global organization. I still say we because I was there for so long and really appreciated the work that I did there. But they are very much a leader in research and the science and of leadership. and have developed many, many breakthrough concepts about how leaders are developed. They continue to be the leader in that in the world, and really pioneered the field of women's leadership starting in the 80s, which, if you can imagine, this was really before there was much to talk about, and wrote the book on breaking the glass ceiling in 1987 based on research on executive women. That research continued, and I'll give you some links at the end where you can see all of the research that the Center for Creative Leadership has done on women and on many other issues also. Last year, my good friend Jennifer Martineau introduced the book Kick Some Glass, and this book was based on the latest research on women's leaders. We introduced our book in March, and we introduced it, Beating the Odds, actually the day that California shut down for the pandemic. So needless to say, all of our launch activities were canceled. I was supposed to be presenting at a book signing in San Diego. The books are still locked up in that office. They still are not the office has not opened since then. Kelly was actually at our European office in Brussels to launch the book, and she barely made it back to the US before things closed down. So this is one of the other reason we're so excited to speak with you is we really never got to talk about the book much. So excited to get that message out. And the difference with Beating the Odds is from the rest of many of CCL's books is those books are all really research books. Our book, although it is based on research and there is lots of research included in it, it's really more about the personal stories of the women who were successful in engineering and science and what made them successful and the types of strategies, winning strategies that we hope you'll be able to learn from and other women will be able to learn from. And I want to make the point here too that the book is not just for women. These concepts are not just for women. Women will not be successful without the support of men, and men play a strong role in making women successful in STEM careers. So with that, a little bit more about the specifics of why we wrote this. And here's the bottom line. And by the way, this is true in India too. I did a little bit of research, although many of my statistics in the book are from the US. India is really quite similar on this particular statistic. You guys are a good example. There are 51% of the IT, I think, in computer science degrees in India are women, but yet they do not make it to the senior management levels. And that's the challenge. So what we wanted to understand with the course that Kelly and I developed that was mentioned in the introduction, and also later with the book, is who makes it and why? Why does this happen? So here's just a little statistic about this. Women leave science, engineering, and technology. And I'm sorry, these bars are science, engineering, and technology. And for some reason, the caption didn't come out. 47% leave before they get to the 10-year mark, 39% in engineering and 56% in technology. So women don't stay in these careers. All of the work that you guys have put into in engineering, in many cases, does not get used or does not get used in the same way because women leave. So that's really one of the things that we wanted to understand. And as I said, this is a similar situation in India, and I have even more statistics on this. Currently, this may be a couple of years old, but fairly similar to what it would be today. 51% in IT, 51% in science, and yet only 30% of the information technology workforce and only 10% of computer science researchers. And that idea and the concept of computer science researchers, as your professors will tell you, is really important. If women don't go into that, they don't really influence the science. And frankly, they don't make as much money. The people who research and publish in academia end up at the higher salary levels. So this needs to change. And that's what we really wanted to understand is how can we change that trajectory and get more women into those senior positions. So why do they leave? And this is unfortunately a sad fact. This is from the Society for Women Engineers. I know that they are also have chapters in India. 70% stated that they left because of organizational climate. So this is where I say men can help. Men can help change that organizational climate. This is a fact that we have to change. So who was able to beat the odds? And this is why we call the book Beating the Odds, because obviously the odds are against you in getting to a VP or C-level technical role. Only 3% are held by women. And again, I looked at your statistics in India, and it was actually a bit better than this. I think it was around 7 or 8%, but still not, it should be 51%, right? 51% of the graduates going into the workforce are women. So why shouldn't these senior positions be 51%? And I'll just tell you a bit of a story about this, because as I was telling the organizers earlier, Kelly Simmons and I met actually on our second week on the job. And people suggested that we meet each other because I was in Silicon Valley and I had been in Silicon Valley my entire career. Kelly had been an engineer. So we both had this shared interest in engineering. We started talking to each other, and we realized this challenge. And I said, it's so strange because I have so many women friends who are engineers, were engineers and have left. And Kelly herself leaving her position as a manufacturing engineer at HP, who she left after about 10 years into her career. And we said, what's happening here, and how can we understand that? And she had just been asked to speak at the IEEE Women in Engineering International Leadership Conference, and we said, wow, let's speak on this topic. So that's how we got into the topic. We then met with the IEEE Women in Engineering in Silicon Valley and really began to work with them. They helped us kind of shape the course that we developed called Advancing Technical Women that was mentioned earlier. They were the pilot group who took the course. We had women from Cisco and HP and Autodesk, PayPal, a number of other companies who took the course. And it was really designed for mid-level technical women. But what ended up happening is we decided that we wanted to have a panel of senior women to speak with this group. Oh, I guess I should probably move my slide here, right? So this is because these are some of the topics that we learned about from this panel of senior technical women. So these are the topics in the book. But what happened was we brought together, first of all, it took a long time for me to find a panel of senior technical women to meet with these women. We had a dinner planned after the course, and I wanted to have 3 or 4 women who were VPs or directors, very senior women. Very difficult to find, very difficult to find. Even in Silicon Valley, when I did find 3 women, 2 of whom are profiled in the book, then they spoke on a panel. They talked about their career trajectories and the types of careers they had had and what their challenges were. And the younger women in the course, and these were mostly women with 10 to 12 years experience, they were just so excited to meet senior women who had made it through the challenges in the workplace and were senior, successful technical women. They practically stalked them to the elevator. They wouldn't let them leave. I think the panel went on for an hour. So that's when Kelly and I realized we needed to understand this more. So this is what we found. Okay, so we ended up, of course, because of our careers, we had known many technical women throughout the work that we'd done. And of course, I've been working in Silicon Valley for 20 plus years, Kelly also in her career. But we decided to dig deeper, and we interviewed at a very deep level about 30 women. And those are the stories in the book. And I think about 5 of those women were Indian American. So we had a nice cross section of women's backgrounds. What we found after doing all of those interviews, in-depth interviews, and we tried to get to the stories behind what made them successful and the stories behind their challenges and triumphs. These are the themes that emerged. Number one, these are women who identify as geeks early in their lives. You know, we had one woman who said, I won the Pink Protractor Award because I always wanted to be a geek. I was technical. I always wanted to fix things. I was always asking questions. So these are women who identify that as their calling and want to pursue a technical or scientific career. The next theme was what we called what glass ceiling. And these are women who do bump into that glass ceiling, but decide they're going to power through and don't let it bother them and just move forward, and are highly competitive and highly, I would say, persistent in moving into that glass, through that glass ceiling. Triumphing over the good old boys. This was, in fact, I would say one of the most difficult chapters to write, because we had many women who actually came across a good old boys network, so to speak, that tried to prevent them from being successful. And there are a couple of stories that will just really break your heart in the book about that. The buddy system, a much more uplifting chapter. This is about women who find allies and mentors, many of whom are men, and are able to succeed with their help. And again, another great chapter and a great concept that I think is so important for all of you, bringing a business perspective. We found that the women who were extremely successful were ones who were able to bring a business perspective to their work. And then finally, Generation Next, learning from millennials or learning from digital natives like yourselves, like many of you. These were basically predominantly older women, because of course they had moved into senior level positions. So they were baby boomers and Gen X for the most part. And so they are now learning from younger women and from younger folks in general in the workplace. So these are the chapters, and I'm going to go through each one and give you some specifics that hopefully will help you in your career as you move forward. But before that, let me say a word about why this matters. You know, why do we want women leaders? Okay, women leaders are good for business. They really are. And there have been numerous surveys that show that having more women in the workforce increases financial performance. Fortune 500 companies with high representation of women on their boards actually financially outperform those that don't have women on their boards. And there are companies in the US, and I hope that this is true in India too, that are really requiring women board members. And in California, there is a requirement, if you're a California-based company, I think they've got until the end of 2020 to comply. No, actually, I think it might be right around now that they need to comply. They must have a woman on the board. So it's very important that women are helping run companies. Higher average revenue with gender diverse business units versus less diverse. And women make the workplace better. And I think you all, this is just kind of instinctive that we know this. Greater job satisfaction, higher levels of employee engagement. If you look on the CCL website, there is a study there that CCL did with Watermark, a women's organization here in Silicon Valley, that actually showed that even men who worked for women felt that they were more engaged, that they had better support from their management. So women are excellent managers, and decreased level of burnout. So all of these great statistics show that we need women in the workplace, and we need women to move to higher levels. So let's dig into the book and what we learned, and talk about how we can hopefully do this and make a more gender diverse workplace. Okay, first chapter, Geek Girls, follow your calling. And I hope this didn't happen to any of you all, but we did hear this from some of the women that we speak to, that women were told at a young age that they aren't going to be good at math. This actually happened to me, and my little story is in the book too. I was told that I was not good at math, and frankly, I wasn't very good at math. But it turned out that all I needed was a little bit of help, and I did get help eventually, and I ended up being a vice president at Symantec and running $1 million budgets. So it really wasn't true that I wasn't good at math, but I believed it. This woman said, hey, I was good at math, and so I just wasn't going to believe that. It didn't make sense, so I decided to ignore it. So that's hopefully what you all did if that happened to you. We looked at a lot of the women in history, of course, who had challenges getting into technical roles. And the story of Anita Borg, actually, we found on the IEEE website. They have an oral history of women in engineering. If you want to take a look at that sometime, it's really, really interesting. And Anita Borg said that one of the reasons she was successful were her parents. And we found that very much to be true, that women were supported by parents and also mothers, very much so, in order to pursue these technical careers. Anita Borg said her parents say, hey, whatever you want to do, we support you, just as long as you do something that's positive in your life. And she had a great story about she and her sisters were always out, you know, finding tadpoles and doing things out in nature and really digging into the science of the earth also. And then, of course, she became a pioneer in computer science. One of my favorite stories is about a young woman from China who, June is her name in the book, and her parents realized when she was a very young girl, 5 or 6 years old, that she had a great aptitude for math. And they were poor people in a small village in China, and really decided that they were going to support her as well as they could in that ability. So the family saved and eventually moved to Beijing so she could get her education there, get the appropriate education there in Beijing. She ended up being extremely successful in her education and was offered a full scholarship to the University of Alabama in the United States. Now, I don't know if you guys know anything about Alabama, but it is in the southern United States. And this was probably, oh gosh, 30 years ago, because she is now a vice president at a very large company here in the United States. So 30 or so years ago, I think they probably had never seen anyone from China at that point. But she was brushed up on her English, had never been on a plane, of course, and studied her English on the plane on the way over. Ended up being a very successful computer science student, got her PhD from the University of Alabama, was the only, there were 2 women who graduated, got their PhDs from the University of Alabama at that point, and ended up, as I said, she's a good friend of mine today. She's vice president of engineering at a large data science company here in the US, and is just so grateful that her parents supported her. So this geek girl's idea, aspiring to technical roles and hoping to get that support. Many don't. The ones that are successful are the ones who do get that support. The glass ceiling. As I said, these are women who looked beyond the glass ceiling, who kept their eyes on the prize and forged ahead and didn't let the glass ceiling bother them. This woman said, I'm more competitive than I realized. I came to the conclusion, and she had a boyfriend who she was going to be a math teacher, but her boyfriend wanted to become an engineer. And she said, wow, if he can do that, I can too. And she did. And she now is the head of a biotech company, the woman who decided to compete with her boyfriend and have a successful career in engineering. She did move into biotech. What's interesting about these women is they often pursued a concept that CCL has done a lot of research on and calls developmental assignments. So what this means is that women don't get asked to take those stretch assignments, those really difficult assignments. And often the boss doesn't give them to the woman because he thinks, oh, she probably can't travel. She has children at home. She may not want to do something this challenging, so they don't get those challenging stretch assignments. And Kelly, actually, my co-author, was frankly a victim of this, and it's one of the things that led her to leaving engineering. She was a manufacturing engineer with HP in Mexico, where HP does much of its manufacturing. There were a group of young manufacturing engineers. She was one of about 4, and they had set up the line down there and were helping run that facility. Well, HP was going to be establishing a new facility in another town in Mexico, not too far from there. So Kelly had just been, very focused on doing an amazing job and hopefully getting that appointment to set up the line on this new manufacturing facility and be the engineering manager, essentially, at this new manufacturing facility. Well, the day came where they announced that appointment, and someone else got it. Another one of her colleagues got it. So she went to her boss, and she obviously was very upset. She said, "Hey, I am really the top engineer. I think you know that. I've done this great job. I should be getting that position." And she was just knocked back when he said to her, "Well, I know you're getting married in about 6 months, and I know you're planning your wedding. So I think you're probably too busy to take this on." Well, she wasn't too busy to take it on. And she said, "Would they have ever said that to my fiance? No, they wouldn't." So it just really hurt her. She did not get the position. And she, at that point, realized that maybe she was going to have to leave engineering, and so sad that she did. Hopefully that wouldn't happen today, but unfortunately, I think it might still happen. So that's the glass ceiling. You have to get those. So let me say something about getting those stretch assignments. Kelly should have asked for that assignment. She waited until it was given to someone else. But what women have to do is ask for those assignments. The minute you see an assignment that you want, that is a stretch assignment, a developmental assignment, that possibly could take you on travel somewhere, could possibly put you into another department for a short period of time. Often these are short-term assignments. Grab that assignment, put forth your qualifications for doing it, and take that stretch assignment, that developmental assignment. Crashing the good old boys party. Let's crash it. Okay, these women crash it. This again was, I think, one of the most challenging chapters to write, because some women had some very heart-rending stories about this. But this woman quoted here found a good way to overcome it. She says, some of these scientists are condescending and acting superior. So what I do is I open each meeting saying, "Let me introduce myself. I want you to know that I have a PhD in computer science. I have been working in these areas. I have these qualifications," and not in an aggressive or bragging way, but just laying the facts on the table so they know that she is more than qualified to participate and in some cases lead the discussion. And this was so important once she figured this out, because she said, a lot of times these people didn't mean to demean me, but they just didn't understand my qualifications. And sometimes she was even asked to get the tea or get the coffee. She said, "I just want to make sure they know that I'm here to play. I'm here to be involved in this discussion. I'm not here to get the coffee." So very important to get those qualifications out there. One of the stories that just kind of broke my heart, although it didn't break the heart of the woman that did it. She was just really a strong young woman. First day on the job, she was a expert in metallurgy. So she was a material science engineer, and she got a job with a steel company. So the steel company had to get samples of the steel and test it, or get samples of the ore that the steel would be made from, and test it. So they would have to get these essentially samples of metals from some of their suppliers. So she was sent to the supplier to get the metal and bring it back for testing. She was a production engineer. She got to the supplier. She knocked on the door, rang the doorbell, whatever. and was introduced to the person, the engineer that she'd be working with. And he said, wait a minute, I've got to make a phone call. He called her boss and he said, who is this woman? You're sending me a woman engineer? You can't have women in the steel business. And the boss said, no, she's a very qualified engineer. She's going to be the engineer that you work with. You need to learn how to work with her, and please give her the respect that she needs. Well, he came out and he said, well, I guess we are working with you. And here's your sample of metal that you can take back and test. And he gave her a chunk of metal that was so big. It was almost as big as her. She was a small woman. And it was huge. And she looked at that and she said, I'm not going to let these guys break me. She said, I decided I was going to get a workout anyway. So she picked up that piece of metal, bent from the knees, picked up that piece of metal, put it in the back of her truck, and took it back to her office for testing. And she said, I'm just not going to let this bother me. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So she went back the next week. I think she had to do this on a weekly basis. They saw that she was not going to buckle under that pressure of the big chunks of metal, and they gradually gave her smaller and smaller samples to test. And she ended up being friends with these men. And this was something that was so interesting in this chapter, is that in many cases, the men who were in the good old boys party, sometimes these women ended up being their boss. That was pretty interesting. But in almost all cases, they ended up being friends, and the men ended up learning themselves how important it was to treat women equally and to give women a chance in these difficult challenges that they have coming up as engineers. So crashing the good old boys party, a tough one, but in many cases, a very important part of becoming a successful engineer in the future. The buddy system, systems and allies, allies and mentors. And hold on, I'm going to just check my time just a second and see if I'm talking too much, which I usually am. Okay, I'm still good. Got 15 minutes here. Important one, women find allies, and often male allies, with complementary skills that they can work together throughout their careers. This actually happened to me. I had a man who I worked with, and I went to another job, and he came with me on that job. And then eventually he became a consultant and gave me some consulting business. So in this case, this woman found someone who was complementary skill set to hers. She was technical. He was had more of a business background. He was going to be given the job. She said, no, let me work with him. And they ended up working together, and more powerful working together. And she learned from him and he learned from her. So finding these buddies and these allies and mentors throughout your career. Now, I will say a word about mentorship and sponsorship. And you'll find at the end of the talk, I'm going to give you some resources. And there's a resource from the Center for Creative Leadership, a free resource on how to find a mentor, how to set up a mentorship program that I would encourage you to take a look at. And it talks about the difference between mentors and sponsors. And there's kind of a saying right now in leadership development that women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. It's easier for women to find mentors who will help guide them on their career journey. But a sponsor is more difficult. A sponsor is someone within your organization who takes on the task and agrees to be your champion and your advocate at senior levels, who will look for a job for you at senior levels, who will be your advocate and make sure that you are promoted and that you get those stretch assignments that you should. So those sponsors are equally as important as mentors. And we talk about that a bit in the book, but both are very important on your career journey. Bringing in a business perspective, one of my favorite chapters. And this woman who was actually with a big shipping company and led the engineering team at that large shipping company, realized that understanding how the goals of her engineering team connect with the broader goals of the company and the broader financial goals of the company was really important. She wanted to make sure, and she did, that she put together the missing links between strategy and execution to align with the company and with industry trends. So you can't really be a scientist and a technologist in a bubble in order, if you want to be successful in a business career, or in not in a business career, but in an engineering and a STEM career in a business. You have to understand the business objectives. You have to build that business acumen. We, in fact, found that women who had a business acumen, who took the time to learn about business, in many cases taking an online course in finance, learning about accounting. In some cases, their companies would actually send them back to school for an MBA or an executive MBA. We had one woman who took a couple of years off from her career to get an MBA. Those are the women who really get promoted above their male peers in almost every case. It turned out to be the number one way that women could get promoted, was to have business acumen, but not just the MBA. You can just, take a course in finance. What you find, and I don't know if this is true of you, but the engineering and the computer science curriculums are so intense, or curricula, I guess, is the proper plural, are so intense that there's not time for business electives. And this is really a shame. So I encourage you, if you can't get it into your curriculum, to find some way to get that business perspective. And really, the point of the business perspective is much more of a focus on customers. So really understanding how the technical work that you're doing impacts customers. And then that's what makes the business run. That's what makes the business work. The story of Chris in the book is really an important story. And Chris is actually another friend of mine, still a friend of mine today. I worked with her for a couple of years. She was vice president of engineering at a kind of a startup, a later stage startup. They had a lot of customers. They were in the network infrastructure business. And her team was working on a new product on using the latest technology. So this was cutting edge stuff. The engineering team was super excited about it. They were going to be the first to market with this new technology. And she was so proud of the work that they had done. So she's doing the final check. They're going to launch the product and begin selling it to customers in about a couple of weeks. She's doing the final check through the launch plan, and realized that there was not a customer training plan, or if there was a customer training plan, it hadn't been executed. So here they were going to launch this brand new, cutting edge, exciting technology, first of its kind, and customers weren't trained. So she put a halt on the launch. And the engineering team was absolutely livid, because they wanted to be first to market. They wanted to get the product out there. And her management team were frankly livid because they had a big revenue number attached to this launch. Their board was ready for them to launch this product. It was, going to be explosive in terms of their growth, and she put it on hold. But she realized that without customer training, there was going to be an even worse impact on revenue, because customers wouldn't be able to use the product, and the customer dissatisfaction could in fact extend to the rest of their product line. So she put a halt to it. They put the customer training program in place. The product was launched about a month late, but customers were trained, and it ended up achieving its revenue goal. It was maybe a quarter later, but at least they got there, and the customers were very satisfied, and ended up probably, I don't know this, but probably buying even more of the company's products for that reason. So she did the right thing, understanding the business implications of that customer decision and really understanding the customer. As a result of this, she got what she felt was really one of the highest compliments that she'd ever had in her career from the CEO. He said, "You know what you are, Chris? You're the API between business and technology." And you all probably know, of course, what API means, application programming interface. He said, "You translate technology into business success. And what a great compliment to her that was. So the API between business and technology was really something that she's still very proud of to this day. So bringing a business perspective, that's the way to get promoted as you move up in the ranks. And I know you all will, if that's your desire. So where do we go from here? Generation next. Senior technical women, and I said these because they were primarily vice presidents, some senior directors, and then some C-level. They see a changing workplace. They see a changing landscape, and they're learning from millennials. And you all are even that digital native generation, and we are ready to learn from you. Many of them said the best thing about young women, they don't have that voice in their head, that imposter syndrome that tells them they don't deserve to be here. They don't want to accommodate, and they won't accommodate attitudes of men that support those biases. They demand salary transparency, and this is so amazing to me because when I was coming up in the world, you never asked what people made. But these are women who are saying, hey, I want to know what he makes. I want to know what he makes. So here's what I make. And I want to make sure that I'm making what I should be making. And still women in the US make 75% of what men make. I think in India, it's even lower. I think it's 65%. So we're not there on salary transparency, but younger women are demanding this. And in fact, in Silicon Valley, there is such a shortage of engineers, they can make these demands. And I hope that this is true of you all as you move into your careers. So what are some of the winning strategies for organizations and for managers? So we've talked about the winning strategies for women. Let me just wrap this up because many of you will become managers. And some of you, I'm sure, are managers today. And so let's take a look at what you can do as you move into the business world and as you begin to have more influence in the business world. So check on your biases. Make sure, whether you're a man or a woman, that you are, or any gender for that matter, that you are checking those biases, that you're being transparent, that you're being open. Look at those stretch and those developmental assignments. Look for them, ask for them. And if you have the opportunity to give those assignments. Take action, finding those mentors and sponsors. And one of the women in the book said she had a really hard time finding mentors and sponsors within her organization. So she went outside of her organization. I ended up being a mentor for several young women who were not able to find mentors and sponsors in their organization. The mentors can come from anywhere. Of course, the sponsor needs to be within your organization. Get those through networking. So go to networking events, participate in these IEEE events, meet the types of people outside that don't know the same things that you do. I mean, this is, I think, so important in networking. Find people that you can learn from and that can learn from you and make those part of your network. And then life balance. We haven't talked much about this, but there's been this, frankly, myth that one of the reasons that women don't make it in the workforce is because of life balance, that they have to take care of children, they have to take care of parents. And of course, this is true. Women carry this burden. But for the most part, women are able to manage that in their careers. They slow down in their careers and then they speed up in their careers and they find ways to manage it. Well, what we need to do is make it a corporate value ultimately, that it's okay that you can support women who do that. And frankly, that men do more of that. Get this life balance going so that you can stay with a corporation for a long time. And then build and nurture a pipeline. If 50% of the women of your engineering group are women at the hiring phase, when you bring young women in, because 50% of your graduating classes are, then there should be 50% at senior levels within the next 10 years, 20 years. So let's set those metrics. Let's say that in 2025, we're going to have 15%, et cetera, and manage to that. That's what companies need to do. So organizations can do a lot to support this. They can have employee resource groups. They can make sure that their hiring panels include women as well as men, that they have women candidates in their hiring areas, that they make sure that they're checking those biases. So with that, let me just show you a couple of resources. I look forward to all of you entering the workforce and hopefully using some of this information. And I think much of it is useful to you now while you're in university. And of course, the professors also, thanks so much for joining us. I know you can help young women and young men with this type of information. And here are some more resources. The book, Beating the Odds, Winning Strategies of Women in STEM, of course, is available through this link or on Amazon. But also on the link, you'll find a number of resources that we used for the book, white papers, research. So be sure and take a look at that. Same thing with Advancing Technical Women. This is the website for the course, which is still offered by the Center for Creative Leadership. It's been, you know, as they said in my introduction, thousands of women have taken this course. It's for women who are at the 10-15 year mark in their career, so not for young women as you guys are. But on that site, research, white papers, I think there's one video of Kelly talking about the challenges of technical women. So that's worthwhile. The Mentoring Startup Kit, I was just looking at that. It has a whole discussion about the difference between mentors and sponsors. There are resources on how to set up a mentoring program, how to get to a mentor. And this is all free from CCL. This was launched as part of International Women's Day. So take a look at that. And same thing with women's leadership resources. Much of the research that CCL has done on women's leadership is on this website. And of course, hopefully you can get a copy of these or click through, or you can search the website and find some of these. Also, CCL's practice of equity, diversity, and inclusion, very important focus for the Center for Creative Leadership. And this website shows what CCL is doing and what they believe in these areas and how they believe companies can tackle it. So with that, I think, goodness, I've only taken 2 minutes too long, but I'm ready for some questions from you all.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being so informative and creating an awareness among us. So I'll tell you the questions. Okay. So the first question is, how can a woman manage her career and homework simultaneously? It's a
wow.
Yes.
That's the one that I just touched on, didn't I? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I would say it's quite difficult, but it can be done. And we didn't cover that in the book. And the reason we didn't cover it in the book is because it's really discussed to a great degree in the previous book from the Center for Creative Leadership called Kick Some Glass. She has an entire chapter on that. And what Jennifer Martineau, the author of that book, and what she talks about is a strategy where you power up and power down. And what she's talking about there is have a very strong start to your career. And then what many women do is actually leave the career for a period of time, but they leave it knowing that they're going to come back. And in many cases, they discuss this with their boss and say, I want to take a couple of years off. I want to take, maybe in some cases even 5 years off. I want to stay up on the technology. And then they make it, their job to stay up on the technology. Other women are able to power down rather than turning off and are able to do job sharing. And a lot of companies are doing it these days where they'll let you do job sharing and where you split with someone else and do half of the position and then are able to manage that while you're raising children. And in many cases taking care of other challenges at home. But I will also refer you to another book, and I'm going to grab it right here from my bookshelf because it's a very important book. It's called, I don't know if you can see it, it's called Athena Rising. And this is a book written by two men who are professors at I'm not going to remember what it's called, U.S. Naval Academy. So obviously teaching a lot of men and making a lot of male mentors there. And what they say is until men take on half of the responsibility for homework, for taking care of children, for housework, for, doing the dishes, for preparing the meals, until men do that, women will never truly gain salary equity and gain equality. And we all know that's not happening. I mean, my husband's great, but he does not take on half of the work. And, that culturally is going to be difficult for all of us, and maybe even more difficult for you. But that's what ultimately is going to happen. And I believe that will change culturally. But in the meantime, things like job sharing, powering down, staying in touch with the technology, and then coming back into the workforce, these are the best ways that you can handle it. And, there are some women that can do it all. I think that's difficult. And I think you end up not doing a great job at both. I think you have to have a strategy to power down a little bit in order to make it work if you have a lot of home responsibilities. Does that help? I hope.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. The next question is, what is the most important non-technical skill that helps women get promoted?
Well, I think that's business acumen. Absolutely business acumen. And I would pull out another book, but I don't want to do that again. But it's a book. Let me look and see what it's called. Well, I don't have it right there, but it's by a guy named Kevin Cope, C-O-P-E. And it's a really short book, and he teaches a course on business acumen. It's a 2-day course. I took it. A lot of companies give it for their people. And what it basically says, and there's a woman that we interviewed that was in the mining industry. So, she's in a highly male-dominated industry. And she said, the first thing I do is I get the annual report. And I look at the annual report of the company. If it's a private company, then, that's more difficult, but you can Google it. You can get the information on their revenue, information on, their business, and really understand the business. And, I actually spoke with a man. He was actually the head of, not the head, but he had some position with the IEEE here in Silicon Valley. And he said, engineers, as technical as we are, and as well as we understand math, we're afraid of financials. We just don't get into the financial side. We leave that to the bean counters. That's not us, but that's what you have to do. And you have just the basics, really, because if you understand the basics of what the company is trying to do from a financial perspective, then you can understand how what you're doing from a technical perspective contributes to it. And that's then also so much more motivating when you realize you're contributing to the company. So business acumen is really the number one thing to get promoted.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Okay. You have a few more questions, ma'am. You're ready to answer, right?
Sure.
Okay. So the next one is, what is the scope for women in administration side?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand that one.
What is the scope for women in administration side, ma'am?
I don't really understand that. Please explain that a little bit better.
The scope in the administration's field, ma'am. What is the scope for women in that field?
I don't know that much about that. I'm going to have to pass on that question. That's really not my area of expertise, and I don't want to say something that I'm not really that familiar with.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. No problem at all.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
If you want to send it to me, I'll look it up and see what I can if I understand what I can understand more about it.
It's just a question, like normal sentence, like what is the scope for administration and for women? So it's fine, ma'am. No, not an issue at all. I'll move on to the next question. What is developmental assignment?
Developmental assignments. Yeah, that's when you have an assignment that is really going to be an assignment that will help you develop in your career. It's often called a stretch assignment. So it's an assignment that really makes you stretch. And I'll give you a good example of that. There was a young woman who I was mentoring who worked for a startup software company, pretty big startup actually. And she had a small engineering team that reported to her. I think she had 6 engineers. Well, they were going to acquire another company that was basically an engineering company. So it was a even smaller company with about 5 engineers. And she was talking to me. She said, oh gosh, they do similar things to what my team does. I wonder who they're going to report to. And I said, well, why wouldn't they report to you? And she had been in her career maybe 7, 8 years, and she just never thought of asking for that group to report to her. So that's a stretch assignment when you do something that you never would have thought you'd be able to do. So she and I worked through it. I said, I want you to think about what that group does versus what you do, your group does, how you work with your group, what your management strategies are, how you would use that group, how they could help you, and how you could expand the scope of your responsibilities if they reported to you. And she did. She came up with a great strategy. She positioned it to the CEO, and she got that group to report to her. So within, a week, she expanded her scope, and the number of employees that she had on her team almost double. But yet she never would have thought about that because it was a stretch. She didn't think that she was ready for it, but she was. So that's what a developmental assignment is, something that you really don't think you're ready for, but you go for it anyway, right?
Okay. There's the last question, ma'am. It's a very general one. What are the strategies that a woman must take if she's uncomfortable with the people but loves the job?
Wow, that's a tough one. I think the best way to handle that is to find someone in the organization that you are comfortable with and get their advice. And actually, this would be a role of a mentor. Is find someone in the organization and say, what would you do? How have you handled this particular situation? And then I would also say, I'll go back on my CCL training. There is a concept that the Center for Creative Leadership has, and this is on their website. If you just search their website for feedback or SBI, it's called situation. It's a feedback strategy called situation, behavior, impact. So what it means is if someone does something that you're uncomfortable with and you want to give them feedback, you say, okay, here's the situation. This is what happened, what was happening. This is your behavior. This is what you did that made me uncomfortable. And this is the impact that it had on me. So you're not saying you did the wrong thing. You're saying what you did had an impact on me. And it is such an open way. And of course, this is one of the things that we talked about is more openness. It makes the person be more open to the feedback. And I would say, think about if there are people that you're uncomfortable with that you could give that feedback to using that feedback system. And I encourage you to take a look at that. I had never heard of such a thing, when I joined CCL, but it's a way to give feedback that is not threatening. And this might be a way that you could address people who are making you uncomfortable, because there's nothing worse than having to leave a job because of those types of things. You want to leave a job because you're going to something new, not because you're leaving something where you're uncomfortable. So I encourage you to take a look at SBI, situation, behavior, impact, feedback mechanism.
Okay. So I will end it with one last question, ma'am.
Okay.
What's your piece of advice for women engineers in India?
Goodness. I think it's my piece of advice for women engineers everywhere is determination. I think, you know, I didn't say this, but I should have. You know, I was a woman in business. I made it to a vice president level. But the difference between a woman engineer and a woman in marketing, which is what I was in, is that you're going to almost always be the only woman, or often the only woman, as you move up the ranks. And it's unfortunate. It should be 50%, right? So it takes determination. It really takes, you have to kind of pick yourself up as Bev did, carrying the big heavy pieces of metal. And you just have to say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I think that determination. And, you know, so interesting in so many of the women that we interviewed, several of whom were from India, said that they got that determination from their mothers and from their families. So just keep being determined, and I think that's the way to succeed in India or anywhere. So best of luck to all of you in doing that.
Great. Great. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for answering all the questions so sportively. So I guess that's the end of the session. So I'll just take my time to express my gratitude on behalf of the ECE department, St. Joseph Institute of Technology, St. Joseph Group of Institutions. First and foremost, I thank our guest speaker, Ms.PATTY ROWLAND BURKE, who shared her thoughts on winning strategies of women in STEM. Thank you, ma'am, for finding time and creating an awareness despite your busy schedule. Thank you for accepting the invitation.
Thank you. It was an honor to speak with you all, and I do wish you all the best success in your careers, men and women, no matter what you decide to do. Thank you
Thank
very
you, ma'am.
much.
Thank you so much. My heartfelt thanks to our beloved chairman, sir, Dr. B. Babu Manoharan, sir, for his consistent upkeep in conduction of this webinar. My sincere thanks to our managing director, ma'am, Mrs. B. Jessipriya, and our director, sir, Mr. B. Sashi Sekhar, for their guidance in conduction of the webinar. I would like to express my gratitude to our principal, sir, Dr. P. Ravichandran, for his support to conduct this webinar. I also thank our head of the department and IEEE chapter advisor, Dr. C. Gnanakausalya ma'am, staff and student affairs, and Dr. G. Rohini ma'am, IEEE coordinator, head of the lab affairs, for their words of encouragement and guidance. Also, I take this opportunity to thank the entire fraternity of St. Joseph Institute of Technology, St. Joseph Group of Institutions, for making this event a memorable success. Finally, I thank all the students, faculties, research scholars from India and other countries for their active participation in this webinar. So the next webinar is by an eminent speaker, Mr. OMER MELIH, who will be giving an interesting talk on energy efficient data collection in cellular IoT networks on 23rd July, 6 p.m. So the interested participants can register in the same link and attend the session. So thank you all for attending. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.